Welcome, everyone, to the Dr. Abs Healthcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Abasolo, a.k.a. Dr. Abs. And on today's show, we have eating disorder and recovery specialist, Mindy Gorman-Plutzer. Now, Mindy brings 25 years of experience to her private practice as a certified functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner and eating psychology coach. Mindy's life experience and training inspired her to create a framework that combines functional nutrition, positive psychology, and mind-body science, introducing a compassionate resolution to physical and emotional challenges resulting from chronic and complex health issues as they relate to eating disorders. She's the author of The Freedom Promise, 7 Steps to Stop Fearing What Food Will Do to You and Start Embracing What It Can Do for You. I'm excited to talk to Mindy, so let's get started with the interview. Hey, Mindy, welcome to the Healthcast. How are you today?
I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time. So I'm really excited about this episode because we're going to be talking about a subject that impacts so many people around the world, and that is eating disorders. And you are an eating disorder and recovery specialist. So I think that a lot of people out there are going to gain a lot of knowledge and learn a lot about this fascinating subject. So I want to dive right in. I understand that you take a functional medicine approach to recovery. So what is a functional medical approach to recovery, and why is functional medicine the way to go?
Well, functional medicine is rooted in a philosophy that believes all systems of the body are connected, every body is unique, and everything matters. And conventional eating disorder recovery, in my experience, personally and clinically, and I'm very happy to talk about my personal experience and really how I came to this place of knowing.
Absolutely.
Was really for me an awakening. The conventional recovery model is really rooted in basically 2 things: behavior modification and weight management. So for the person who is restricting, it would be weight restoration. For the person who is suffering or struggling with binge eating disorder, obviously it's going to be weight loss and obvious behavior management techniques. Eating on time, eating everything, all foods fit, and then changing the behaviors. And behaviors really are morphing from a belief system. What I discovered in my own recovery process was that my body was really struggling as a result of the behaviors that I had been engaging in. I was a restrictor and I consistently purged. So for me, my gut was basically ravaged.
Wow.
And I had all of these symptoms that showed up as IBS, ended up being small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO as we know it, suffering with bouts of diarrhea, constipation. And I was really at a point where I was feeling not only shame because I had this strong belief and knowledge that my behaviors had brought this on, but I was also feeling as though my body was betraying me. Through my studying, learning about functional nutrition and functional medicine nutrition, I learned that I had a choice. I learned that I could address the systems of my body. I could feed my gut, and I could feed my gut in a way that it would not only heal, but it would stop the foods that I was putting into it would no longer feed my anxiety. And it opened up a whole new world for me. And where I was feeling demoralized because of my behaviors and the treatment protocols that I was introduced to, I could now feel empowered. I had a choice in my recovery. I could be a partner in my recovery. And that opened up a whole new world for me and allowed me to create a signature framework and really begin to pay it forward, which in turn helps me embrace my own recovery.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful when, you were basically the student back then and now you're the teacher, but you actually went through your own experience. I think that's so powerful when somebody actually goes through the same thing of with the people that they're actually teaching. So I think that's amazing. So what are some of the things that patients out there need to know with regards to recovery?
The very first philosophy, the very first ideal that I want everybody out there who's struggling with some sort of an eating disorder or even disordered eating behaviors needs to know is that the eating disorder, the disordered eating behaviors are not the problem. They started out as a solution, a beautiful solution to what you felt was too fearful or too intolerable for you to handle.
Mm,
That's number one. The shame has to come away from the whole scenario. You are not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You just need to look at your story and work on reframing it, turning the pages on the parts of the story that no longer work, finding a blank page, and start to write what can become your happily ever after. And that can be done with proper support. It can be done with the proper nutrition. And nutrition is a really big part of this, because the conventional treatment protocol follows a philosophy known as all foods fit. And what that says is that in order to be fully committed to recovery, you need to be willing to eat everything.
mm,
Now, granted, people who are struggling with disordered eating, eating disorders, definitely struggle with a fear of food. What will food do to me rather than embrace what food can do for me? And at the same time, people who are struggling in such a way that they are overeating, binge eating, they're using food as a means to self-soothe. They're using it to numb, distract, avoid them from facing what, again, they fear to be intolerable. Another big piece of this to understand is that eating disorders are a language of their own. When we have emotions that we don't know how to process, they're going to play out in different ways. And when we think about food and our relationship to it, food was our very first experience with being held, with being seen, with being heard, and being nurtured and
yeah.
nourished. And that memory lives deep within us.
Mm.
That's why eating disorders and disordered eating behaviors are often so common as a means to self-soothe.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, obviously, this is a two-way street. Obviously, the practitioners, what do they? What are some of the things that they need to know in regards to recovery? Because it's not only the patient. I think the patient and the practitioner have to be always in tune when it comes to that.
Yeah. I think that the patient as well as the practitioner need to understand that it's imperative to bring one's body into the conversation. I always like to say when I'm mentoring colleagues or working with a client, invite your body to the table as an honored guest.
Mm,
It's very important. What does your body want? What are you really hungry for? And that's one of the first steps. And very often in the paradigm of this all foods fit conventional protocol, it's first we eat, then we talk. And while that's important, and getting somebody from a state of nutritional deficiency to sufficiency is very important as it impacts the brain and it impacts our ability to receive. A practitioner needs to understand that where the patient is might be at a place where they're unable to receive. And that's where we need to clear the muddy waters, so to speak, of inflammatory thoughts,
yeah,
inflammatory beliefs, and really spend a lot of time understanding where this need to self-soothe comes from, root cause.
yeah, absolutely. No, totally agree with you there. So, why do you believe that recovery is so elusive for so many?
Recovery is uncomfortable. And while recovery is a choice, and I know most people that I'm blessed to work with come to see me with every intention of going forward and putting these behaviors behind them. But there are 4 blocks, as I see it, to recovery. The first one is worthiness, believing in your value, believing in the fact that you have an innate right to be valued and to ask for your universal given right to be blessed. And a lot of people have trouble with that, especially when they've come to these behaviors as a means to self-soothe. What are they self-soothing from? So that's number one. Second block is the inability or unwillingness to sit in the discomfort. And recovery from anything is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable psychologically, emotionally, mentally, when you're asked to let go of parts of your story. Very often we're attached to our story in such a way that it becomes our identity. And then it begs the question, who will I be without it? And the other part is that it's physically uncomfortable. Refeeding the body, changing habits and behaviors can be very uncomfortable, whether we're talking about a restrictive eater who is now introducing foods for the first time, or the binge eater who is needing to really understand what it feels like to be hungry and stop when she or he has had enough.
Yeah.
Those feelings can be very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The third block to recovery is mindset. Most dieters, most people with eating disorders, disordered beliefs about food in their body are really operating from a mindset of scarcity. Not enough.
Yeah.
The disease of not enough. They need more. They feel that something is missing. They're walking around with a deep sense of discontent. Fear, of course, is at the root of that. And that shows up for the dieter or the restrictive eater or even the binge eater. Well, I'm going to finish this whole box of cookies because for the next 3 weeks, I won't have one.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to get up 5 o'clock in the morning and take that spin class to work off that box of cookies that I just finished. That's scarcity.
Yeah.
If we can operate from a mindset of abundance, we're in the what is rather than the what if.
Yeah.
Abundance speaks to gratitude. It speaks to presence. It speaks to a coming home to oneself.
Yeah. And as far as your recovery, obviously you had I imagine you had those same 4 blocks. Like, what do you think pulled you through and allowed you to break away from those blocks and, basically turn to the path of recovery and abundance?
First thing is that desire has to be bigger than fear. Embracing that I could be empowered. Embracing that food is neither good nor bad. And that if I eat an imperfect food, I am not an imperfect person. And consistency.
Yeah.
Consistency. And learning to understand the meaning of trust. We can't trust what we don't love, and we can't love what we don't trust. And if we are to love ourselves, then we have to learn to trust. And for people who are struggling with eating disorders, it's about trusting their hunger.
Yeah.
Questioning their hunger. What are they really hungry for? And then, of course, consistency.
Yeah. And when do you feel like you reached that point where, you made that decision, you began to be committed to your purpose and move forward and on the path to recovery?
That's such a great question. I love that question because unlike any other addiction where, you can state, well, I had my last drink on September 1st, or I stopped gambling on February 2nd.
You eat every day. You got to eat.
Right. The disordered eating, for me, this is how I describe it anyway, it lifted like a cloud. And it happened gradually. For example, one day I forgot to weigh myself. Another day I left the house without studying the size of my thighs and how they looked in my pants. Another time I was out for lunch and I ordered a salad and I forgot to ask for dressing on the side. And I ate it anyway. And the sun still set and rose the next morning.
Oh.
And little baby steps like that helped me to see that I didn't need those external forces in order to feel valuable and in order to be the woman that I want it to be for my family and, of course, for myself, because truthfully, recovery is relational. And it starts with our relationship to self. Our relationship to self is reflected in our relationship to everything else. And food is such, of course, a big part of that. But we need to learn to come home to ourselves.
Absolutely. Now, you had mentioned disordered eating. So, for the audience out there, what is the difference between disordered eating and an eating disorder?
So, disordered eating is basically any abnormal obsession with food and how you behave with it. And it could show up very much like an eating disorder. But the difference between disordered eating and eating clinically diagnosed eating disorders is the degree of severity.
Mm.
So it could show up, of course, as restricting, obsessive calorie counting, excessive exercise, constantly thinking about food all the time, questioning what you're eating, thinking about what you already ate today and what you're going to eat tomorrow. Or in my case, it was always about what I ate today and what I was not going to eat tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's disordered. I also want to say that disordered eating, I believe, is also a product of misinformation that is driven by misguided beliefs. And that's when you have somebody who is so tied to the influencers on social media, eat this, don't eat that. The person who is following a diet because their trainer's cousin lost 30 pounds on it and is not connected enough to their own body to figure out what their body needs. Another form of disordered eating can occur as a result of chronic illness. Being so fearful, becoming so fearful of food and what it will do to you in terms of inflammation or digestive upset because you're dealing with chronic illness. So it's really basically any abnormal behavior that creates an obsessive train of thought about food and body.
Gotcha. Hold on. Wait for is that the ambulance or
Yeah,
outside of your window?
I'm 24 stories up, believe it or not, in the heart of New York City.
Oh, that's probably common then, I can imagine. Okay, so now I also want to differentiate between emotional stress eating and binge eating disorder. What's the difference there?
Okay. So many of us know what it's like to come home from a tough day and feel like we either deserve something indulgent or using food that's celebratory, that's spurred on by emotion. And also stress, as I said, our feelings about food are buried very deep within us. So the mind knows, come home, feel bad, eat something, feel better. But it's done with a conscious choice.
Mm.
Binge eating disorder is driven by more of an urge, and it occurs in an effort not to feel any emotion.
So you want to like
So
take the
yes,
pain away, you just basically binge.
stress eating can certainly turn into a binge,
Mm.
but it need not. It can just be, I'm tired, I'm going to eat this, I'm lonely, this is going to make me feel better. And you're making a choice and you're not really feeling guilty about it.
Gotcha.
Binge eating takes over.
Mm.
People describe a binge as being lost in a void, being in a zone. And that's very different than typical stress eating. And I'm starting to move away from the term emotional eating because I really believe that we need to bring emotion to the table. There's nothing wrong with feeling our emotions. And by creating this scenario about emotional eating being something negative, it's sending the message that feeling your emotions is negative.
Yeah.
And I don't think that can happen. I want us all to bring emotion to the table, joy and sensuality and experience, no matter what we're experiencing. And also realize that we need to honor our stress. I just read today that binge eating, occurrences of binge eating among women since we're in this global health crisis, has increased 41%
Wow. Wow, that's incredible.
because people need to check out.
Yeah. No, I mean, with all the, financial stress, the fear of getting sick, I mean, being quarantined for so long, I mean, I can imagine, that was a big part of it. Um, Now, I mean, what other types besides those two that you just discussed? What are the other various types of eating disorders that people should know about out there?
Okay, well, there's anorexia nervosa,
Okay.
which is characterized by severe restricting. Sometimes it's accompanied by purging, which would be laxative abuse, the use of appetite suppressants, or self-induced vomiting.
Mm,
Um, Very often, people struggling with anorexia, I would say most often, have a fear of gaining weight. They suffer from body dysmorphia. In other words, what they see in the mirror is not what other people see. They envision themselves to be much bigger than they actually are. And anorexia nervosa is extremely dangerous. It causes death. It causes a myriad of health issues, obviously bone loss, cardiac arrhythmias, low blood pressure, hypoglycemia, blood sugar irregularities, and all that will ensue. Of course, adrenal fatigue, and that, of course, can escalate to adrenal failure. Um, and then there is bulimia nervosa, which is characterized by periods of overeating past the point of being full, but also with that purge
yeah.
situation coming into effect. Then there's binge eating disorder, which is characterized by the overeating way past the point of being full, but there is no purging with that.
Gotcha.
There's also an eating disorder known as ARFID, avoidance restrictive food intake disorder,
Wow.
which sometimes comes up as a result of a trauma, whether it be a reaction to a choking incident, it could be a textural sensitivity, where certain foods are absolutely avoided.
Gotcha. Question, as far as a support system, um, obviously everybody's support system is different, but what would you suggest to those people who know a friend or a family member that have an eating disorder, or they've just found out about their eating disorder? How is the best way to approach that to get them help? Because I mean, I imagine, you bring it up to them, maybe they don't think they have a problem, but they need help. Like, what's the best way to approach that without, you know, kind of ruffling their feathers a little bit?
I see that you're struggling.
Yeah.
How can I support you? That's the first thing. No judgment, just absolute unconditional love and support. But like anything else, the person has to want to recover. There are rare instances where families and friends need to host an intervention when somebody becomes medically unstable. I would love to see us be able to avoid that point. But the best thing we can do is just ask our loved one how we can help. What's
Absolutely.
going on? What are you feeling? What are you not feeling? It's never about the food. So we don't want to talk about the food. We just want to talk about what they're hungry for. How can I support you? How can I help you? What is it that you need? And let them know that it's okay to ask for what they need. Most people that are struggling with eating disorders have trouble asking for what they need.
Yeah.
They fear that whatever they need is too big, so they stuff it down, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. Wow, that's so powerful. That's I think amazing advice. So just to recap the various root causes of eating disorders, can you just basically let the audience know what those are so they can, be on the
Absolutely.
lookout? Yeah.
Well, there is a very large genetic component. that we really didn't talk about.
Okay.
60 to 85% of people who struggle with eating disorders have some sort of genetic piece in there. Now, there's a wonderful researcher out of the University of North Carolina. Her name is Cynthia Bullock. And she says, and I'm quoting her, genetics loads the gun, the environment pulls the trigger.
Mm.
So that's really important, with that whole nature versus nurture piece.
Yeah.
Very often the root cause would be triggers, messages that we received, ways we interpreted the messages we were given. You can have 2 siblings, 3 siblings in a family, and not all of them interpreted the messages the same way, and not all will have the propensity to develop the eating disorder. Another thing to understand, and this really speaks to the functional medicine piece and why it's so important to address the body as a whole and all the systems of the body. Children that struggle with digestive dysfunction have a higher propensity to develop eating disorders later on. So that speaks to the biological piece. The hunger hormones can become dysregulated. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, leptin, the fullness hormone. So they can become dysregulated. And when that happens, it's very difficult to discern. And then that morphs into a lack of trust in one's body. Yeah. Of course, we have the triggers of social media and all that comes with that. We have an overload of nutritional advice. A mentor of mine says we're living in a high fat diet, right? Eat this, don't eat that, move this way, don't move that way. What's missing, the common denominator that's missing in all of this, is the connection to one's body. What is your body telling you? What is it that you need to feel your best? So that's a really big piece.
And as far as when you talk about functional medicine, I mean, what kind of tests can you run in terms of that to, basically see where there are imbalances in the patient's nutrition that you can actually address?
Absolutely. Well, most people who have had a history of eating disorders are suffering with some sort of dysbiosis. Whether it be SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, leaky gut is very, very big part of the equation. So we really need to heal the gut. Food sensitivities will pop up as a result of that. So I think that's very important. But I also believe it's very important to test for adrenal function, to see how able the person is to handle stress. Because when you're in that state of adrenal fatigue, you feel as though you can't even face what you need to face. So we need to, number one, make sure that the nutrition is adequate for the individual, not forcing them to eat everything in an effort to prove their commitment to recovery. Make it very bio-individual with the understanding that there is a fear factor. So working with somebody that can help you through with the meal support. Sleep is so important for healing and restorative. Blood sugar balance is imperative, right? Because blood sugar balance impacts the adrenals, and the adrenals impact blood sugar. So that's very, very important to address from a functional perspective. So I think testing for gut imbalances, testing for absorption issues, very important, and testing for adrenal function would be a great way to start.
That's great. That's great advice. I want to talk about maybe now like the male perspective. I know you talked about 41% just in this pandemic alone, how, the rates have risen for women. How much do eating disorders affect men in today's world?
More and more.
Wow.
More and more. The pressures, financial pressures, social pressures. Unfortunately, men aren't as forthcoming as women are. I really believe it's a hidden epidemic for a lot of men. We're as sick as our secrets, and that pains me. If I have seen hundreds of women, I could count on one hand the amount of men that I've worked with.
Wow.
Because, men it's the image,
The
right?
tough exterior. Yeah.
It's the image.
Yeah.
And women are um, they're more likely to ask for help.
Yeah. Wow. So just to, I guess, finish the interview off, how did your personal and clinical experience with recovery impact and influence the work that you do every day now?
Oh, it made such an impact. First of all, it changed the way I approach eating disorder recovery coaching. I work with my clients and help them figure out who they are as eaters.
Mm.
How are they eating? Why are they eating? When are they eating? And the philosophy behind that, my deeply held belief, is that when we address those issues, the how, the why, and the what has a funny way of taking care of itself. When I start working with somebody, I'll tell them right off the bat, I'm not concerned with what you're eating right now. Concerned with how you're eating and why you're eating. And the when is important because we want to make sure that the body is receiving in conjunction with the natural rhythms of the body so that digestion is most efficient and the body can get into some sort of a flow, which is really very, very important. So, and then what happened for me is that I started to organically think about the the psychological, the mental, and the emotional and the physical aspects of my own recovery. And I created organically this signature framework that's an acronym for freedom. So it's find your enough, rest and digest, eat when you're hungry, stop when you've had enough, eat mindfully, do something every day to make your body feel alive. Only eat whole foods as often as you can, and make sure you're fully nourished by what you're not going to find in the kitchen.
Now, those are things to live by. Love it. So first off, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I think this has been such an informative healthcast. But before I let you go, Mindy, I want you to let everybody know, because I'm sure people may have some questions. They may want to reach out to you. So how could people find you? Talk about your website, social media, etc. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, Instagram, I'm at The Freedom Promise. My website is thefreedompromise.com. Can email me. I'm always happy to receive emails. Mindy at thefreedompromise.com. That's Mindy, Mindy. And if they go to my website, they can download some free resources. I have a guide, my 7 Steps to Food Freedom, which I just outlined for you. I have a free master class where I take a deep dive into 3 of the steps, introduce you to 3 of my clients, and talk a little bit about how I've worked with them functionally. And I have a new video series where if you enroll every day for 10 days, you get a very short video that introduces my functional approach and how it compares to the conventional approach. So that's all there on the website. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope.
Thank you so much, Mindy. And once again, guys, remember her website, thefreedompromise.com, and check her out on social media. Thank you, Mindy, so much for coming on and giving my audience so much knowledge on this very, very serious subject. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.